Education in Norwalk is always a top priority for all legislators, regardless of party. And as somebody who is not only a fifth generation Norwalker, somebody who graduated from the public schools, sold real estate in Norwalk for 20 years, and certainly understand how that affects property values, but being a dad and a state senator, education for me anyway is really one of our top priorities here that anybody could have in their community. It's been very important to me as well. One of the areas, of course, that any parent looks at is funding for their children's school, and that for me as a parent of two boys who attend the public schools has always obviously been an issue as well, and always been an issue. So let me just explain a little bit about how the funding formula works in Hartford. It's called the Educational Cost Sharing Formula, but that's not the only formula that's in our state. But the Educational Cost Sharing Formula is one that came about through a court case in the 1980s, and it was a formula that provided money for cities and towns all across the state. We have 162 school districts in the state, and it provides money based on a number of things, most of which is on grand list. Now, the grand list is the combination of all the properties and how much they're valued at in one community. So Norwalk has a very high grand list because our property values are high, and we also have a number of large businesses here as well. So a small town or a poorer city would have a smaller grand list than Norwalk would. So because of that, Norwalk gets shortchanged on money that we receive from the Educational Cost Sharing Formula. That formula doesn't get started from zero every year. It just, if you put $1 into that formula, that gets divided by the formula and by the amount of school districts that we have in the state of Connecticut. One of my priorities has been to, change it, but until we change it, is find other ways around in which we can get some additional money. One of that has been putting some funding into the educational cost sharing. Two has been putting way more money into priority school district grants, because there's less priority school districts than there are ECS school districts by a lot. Also by funding other areas for capital improvements, for our preschool, in other ways that will help bring funding. In addition to the sales tax sharing that I've championed for many years, that's bringing Norwalk an additional $2 million this year. Our increases from these past 2 years, from the past 2 years prior, has been 15.6%. So Norwalk has received 15.6% more in state funding, which can go to educational funding as well, than it did in the previous 2 years. Think about all that you may have heard about in Connecticut about our fiscal challenges. We've still managed to receive a significant bump in funding thanks to the sales tax sharing and some of the bumps that we've had in educational cost sharing and priority school district funding as well. Norwalk did not lose a dime over the last 2 years in educational funding. As a matter of fact, it went up, and it's gone up to the criticism of even some newspapers and some others upstate who said that that hasn't been fair. But yet, because of the fact that I think Norwalk has been shortchanged, I'm going to continue to fight for that funding and make sure that Norwalk receives its fair share. Hopefully we can get a new formula. We have the CJEF lawsuit that has now been appealed to the state Supreme Court. Depending on whatever the court does, I'll be ready to go into action, devise a new formula, and make sure that Norwalk is treated a little bit better under the system that we currently have.